Good morning, everybody. We are here. I'd like to thank Zach Sears for letting us use the back deck here at Minglewood. I'm here with Shawn Henry and Jason Grove, and we're here to talk about and maybe dispel some rumors and talk about why the zoning. I don't even know if it's 3A is. We're going to explain why it's coming, what is the purpose of it, and what are the pros potentially or the cons or whatever. And what you're city council.
City council.
And you are
Planning board.
I'm planning board, and I'm Joey Schmittaro. Good morning, Gloucester. There's a lot of people with very serious concerns. One of my initial concerns is that I had heard, and please just dispel anything that I say that is incorrect right off the bat. I'd heard that Shaw's was because it's right next to the train station, and this is an MBTA thing. What is it?
MBTA Communities Act.
Communities Act, much better than thing.
The thing,
The thing that they would be able to put 200 units there without, unequivocally, like without having to get any permit.
Yep.
No, that's false.
That's false.
Yeah,
That's
that's
false.
the
Okay.
actual irony of this is that the immediate area surrounding the station is not in the district because that does contain our commercial properties, Shaw's, for instance, sub shop across the street, salon, etc. It's not. We focus this on where housing is already. So,
Yeah.
with the idea that it would give people the opportunity for a single family home or a two family home to convert it to a third if they decide to do that. Because that's the target within the law. 3A law is a minimum of 3 family target. And so that's how we designed it.
Was that something that we were trying to get past a couple of years ago?
So, yeah, there was a form of that. There was a number of zoning amendments that were brought forward by the planning board to the city council, designed to facilitate infill housing, right?
Yeah.
So you have a 2-family and you want to put a 3-family, but you have to go through this process. This fairly expensive, usually involves lawyers and going
Yep.
through the ZBA process. So that
Easements and
all those things.
Yeah.
And the intention was to create and incentivize some infill housing by reducing some of the more sort of unnecessary processes
Red
that
tape.
go there. Exactly, red tape. Those all came out of the housing production plan that was devised by planning board, planning department, approved by the city council. They come out of recommendations that go back as far as the 2001 plan, the 2001
Yeah.
plan 2000. But the thinking here has always been, we have a housing affordability crisis. We have a housing crisis that, not for big, fat, lovely condos that we can build out in Atlantic Street. We have one for like normal families, young families, seniors who want to age in place. Those people, those are the ones who are having a hard time finding a place to live. So the 3A
it's
zone-
everywhere. I mean, it is.
It's everywhere.
It's not just Gloucester,
No.
Massachusetts. We are not.
No.
We don't have a unique situation here.
No.
But Beverly, everybody
Yeah.
has
No,
it. Has this.
everybody has it, and that's. I was sort of anticipating this question. Was we have a regional housing crisis, we have a national housing crisis, but locally, and the one we're focused on is the one we have here. When houses are going now for median income or a sale price of close to $1 million, that's not bringing in young people who have young families who are trying to start out, establish a place.
Keeping young families here.
Or keeping young families here. And so 3A was the state's response to that regional issue, which is to say that most of the communities that are in the 3A district, or the MBTA communities district, have single-family housing as their primary zoning. Now, we don't have single-family housing except for Eastern Point and parts of Shore Road, but we do have, because we're a transit station, we come into the mix here. But again, if you look at the nuts and bolts of 3A, all we have really done is remove the ZBA permitting process, the underlying zoning, all of the setbacks, all of the requirements to be conforming with your lot and where your house is placed, all exist as they do today. Nothing's changed.
Nothing changed.
The only thing that's changed is there's minor changes. We've added 5 feet potential for the height, and there's a 10-foot difference in the setback in the back, but that's That's mitigated by the fact that the front yard has to essentially be in conformity to the front yards of the neighbors left and right. They have to be within a certain range. So, but effectively nothing has changed except the by right aspect of it, and
Yeah,
only in a very limited number of properties.
Yeah.
You know.
You go back to the amendments that you brought up earlier. The amendment that was focused on 3-family by right in the R5 district. We proposed that because basically there's very set standards that the ZBA has to check off as they're looking at. Do you meet the setback requirements, et cetera, et cetera. And the idea was that if an applicant already meets all those requirements, why put them through the process of the ZBA hearing, that whole process and expense, whereas the building inspector can do that on their own, can say, yes, you have to meet the setback requirements, you're a conforming lot, et cetera, so here's your building permit. And essentially that's what the state was asking us to do for 3 families in a certain district. Again, that's why we responded to this downtown area, because number one, it's proximate to the train station, which there was a requirement that 50% of all our zoning that we do for this has to be within that proximity to the train station. But number two, this is the neighborhood, the zone in our city that currently has multifamily, 3 families. You know, it's a mix anywhere from single family homes, I think, in terms of R5 district itself, up to there, I think there are several 8-family homes in the neighborhood. So it's not a significant change on the neighborhood.
Well, I think this is one of those things that seems like the family aspect of it seems like such a no-brainer. It's like what every immigrant family when we came here, everybody lived together, right? That was all the Italian families, all the Portuguese families, like and you had the built-in babysitting with the grandparents living and the kids, the younger kids that had babies, their grandparents may be able to take care of them and stuff like that, and so that's. I mean, I'm in favor of stuff like that. I was more concerned, and I do think that. So with that 5-foot increase, probably makes a bunch of places that they wouldn't be able to get that 3rd unit. Maybe that now it makes it.
That's
Now,
the idea.
now it allows it.
The idea being that if you look at how houses are constructed, you could do it within a 30-foot thing, but your top floor is going to be really constrained, especially if you're adding on an extra unit to an existing 2-family. So the intention really was that the vast majority of communities in our area have 35 feet as the height for residential properties anyway, and a lot of these properties that are in this zone are already in that range. We're not talking about a dramatic increase. Suddenly there's going to be these massive houses everywhere. Greg Cadavatore, our planning director, pointed out a number of houses. He said, what's the height of this house? It was a 3-family and it was 34.9 feet. It exists already. It looks like every other house in the neighborhood, and it didn't seem like a particularly significant change, other than making sure that we can create housing that would be, livable, right?
Yeah,
We don't have 7-foot
the
ceilings.
surprising thing when you start looking at our zoning that was adopted back in the 60s, that it didn't really acknowledge what exists on the ground when it was adopted, right? And that's why, even within the R5 area, which is supposed to be 5,000 square foot minimum lots, the vast majority of them are not 5,000 square foot lots. And that was again one of the reasons why we looked at what was on the ground, and the most significant change between R5 and the zoning we adopted for 3A is a shift from 5,000 square foot to 4,000 square foot lot, because that's the realistic lot size that exists within that R5 area. Similarly, the West Gloucester station, that's zoned R10, 10,000 square foot minimum, but the vast majority of lots along that stretch of Essex Avenue are 6,000 square feet. So for the West Gloucester station, that was the change we made there, from 10,000 to 6,000 square feet. And basically it mirrors, because that 6,000 is so close to our R5 zone, it essentially mirrors that for the most part.
What would you say to people that say it isn't fair that the state is holding over your head? Like, you're not going to get grant money if you don't do this.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I would say that the reason that 3A exists in the first place is that individual communities did not take responsibility for handling the increase in population and growth that has happened in the region. And as a result, they've gone and made this law. Every law has a consequence, and if there's no consequence to the law, there's no way to enforce and get communities to do it. And there are some communities that may be very happy to not have any of these grants. But in the last week, we've been notified of 2 grants. One, $400,000 grant for water and sewer improvements along Gloucester Avenue and Grove Street, and one for $500,000 for the secondary treatment plant that we're in the process of getting done. That's $900,000 this week alone of grants that are subject to compliance with 3A.
Yeah.
And I think actually, if you look at it more broadly, take 3A out of the equation. 40A, which is the state law that allows municipalities to zone, and the home rule law, which is again one of the state laws that allows municipalities the authority to zone locally.
Well, municipalities.
Yeah, cities and towns.
Gotcha, yep.
Both of those state unequivocally that zoning has to comply with state law and the state constitution. We can't pass zoning that violates the state law. And most any state grant you look at, the application has on it a testament. You have to attest that you are in compliance with all state law. So even though it's come to the forefront of the discussion because 3A has entered the mix and people are concerned about why is the state doing this to us. The fact is that the state grants have always come to us predicated on the fact that we are complying with state law.
Well, they make
They
made the law, and
There-
then they say, well, you got to. If you don't follow it, you're not going to get it.
There's a hierarchy.
Right,
That bothers. It does bother me.
But that's just-
I'm going to say how I feel.
I
That bothers
understand
me.
that, but there is a hierarchy. There is a federal law, there's state law, and then
Yeah.
there's local law.
Yeah.
And your local laws have to comply with everything above you, right? And so people talk about this idea of loss of sovereignty. There's no loss of sovereignty here.
Yeah.
Right? We are obligated. We can say we're not going to become compliant. That's what the vote is trying to say, and they're saying we're going to say we're not going to be compliant. Well, as elected officials, we are bound to uphold the state law of both the local laws and the state and federal laws. I mean, it's a part of our oath. But if we decide we're not going to be compliant, then we're deciding to accept the consequences of turning away potentially millions of dollars of funding. We have, this sewer project. The sewer project is not. This is not why you vote for 3A. 3A is a sound legislation on its own, right? It addresses almost identically what we've been trying to do locally anyway.
Housing.
Right, housing and also specifically multifamily housing and in areas that are close to infill development. So, from a standpoint of our planning thinking, it sits directly right in the midst of everything that we've talked about for the last 24 years. Okay, but from a practical point of view, in terms of the zone, or in terms of the consequence of not complying, we have what's called we're a housing choice community, right? Housing choice communities get a preferential interest rate on money that we borrow from the state revolving fund, the SRF, and we are going to have to borrow a bucket load of money to do this project. There's a federally mandated project, this secondary sewer treatment plant. It's over $200 million, right? So do the math. I asked Sony to do the math for me. If we ignore 3A and we lose our housing choice communities designation, we're losing basically a 0.25% interest rate, a 0.5% interest rate, excuse me. That's worth about $13 million just on back of the envelope accounting over the next 4 years. So that makes our project $13 million more expensive, and it jeopardizes our potential to borrow.
Okay.
So
What does they're talking? So the Mary Ann Cliche lady said something about a project that's going up by Sam Park's property up there.
Yeah.
What is that? Is that on the table already?
There's no project. There's no current project.
There's no current project.
There's a vacant lot that when the Market Basket shopping area went in that was designated to become an assisted living facility. In all the years that that lot is set vacant, there's been not a single company that does assisted living
It's come to us.
approach Sandpark or the city to take a look at that site. And so, again, thinking about where housing exists, the type of housing that exists in the neighborhood, we, for the downtown station area and the West Gloucester station area, we maintained the bare minimum 3-family by right for those two districts. But since that lot is adjacent to Halyard, which is a larger multi-family project, we essentially zoned it for a similar density. So I believe the calculation was based on the size of that particular lot. If it was built to maximum capacity, it would be another 60 or 65 units housing.
And how many are at Halyard right now?
200,
200.
of which 30 are affordable and designated affordable. And if you had 60 or 65 units, 15% would have to be affordable in that development as well.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that when
Wait, what
people-
percentage?
15%.
15%.
So when people
Yeah.
talk about this is not about affordable housing, that's correct. I mean, the affordable housing, quote unquote affordable housing, which is the designated HUD, capital A affordable housing, wasn't included in 3A, but it does have a provision that if you already have affordable housing ordinances on your books, you can utilize them, and if you do a feasibility study, you can use your own numbers. They have some other numbers that are less, but our numbers call for 15% at 80% AMI. So it's 15% of 60 is what? That's another 15, I can't do math, nine
Yeah.
units.
So 3A has, except it for large projects, it's not a affordable housing act, it's just a number of units act.
Yep.
Right, and the idea again behind
You're not strictly saying we want this much affordable housing here, we just want more housing.
Yeah,
Right.
Well,
But
in
the
this
intention
instance,
is
if
that-
you're doing infill development and adding a unit to an existing unit, your costs to create that unit are far lower than building
Oh,
a
absolutely.
new unit someplace else. So again, by definition, it's not capital A affordable housing, but it's more affordable housing than what exists in the market
Yeah.
already. And
Well, there's
again,
more units, there's more supply.
Right, and also, it opens up that
Smaller
opportunity
and-
for a current homeowner to decide, let me build an additional unit to house my parent, my aging parent, or my kids coming back from college that want to come back to Gloucester and live here.
100%.
And it just makes it easier for those folks to do that. The notion that the developers out there on the horizon looking to buy up a single family home on Gloucester Avenue to convert it, they're not there. And if they saw money in it, they could do it already, right? They just use the existing process, buy it, go through the ZBA process. So this is really about easing the burden on the existing homeowner.
You're talking about the foundations that mainly are already existing, you're going up, it's not real sprawl so much.
No,
Right.
because already the way that the housing is laid out in most of downtown, they're very close to the setbacks. And here's the thing: if you have a 4,000 square foot lot, but your house is on the edge of that lot, or too far back, or too far front, you don't get to do your addition by right. You still have to go to the ZBA. So when you look at this sort of the general area, and you start discounting the houses that are on lots that are smaller than 4,000 square feet, and then you start discounting the houses that are out of compliance in terms of the existing zoning, with the setbacks or whatever, you're really raking away a good percentage of the existing housing. So relatively few compared to the overall area are actually going to be able to do it. And then you got to want to do it.
It's kind of amazing to me that Shaw's isn't on the table with the parking that's already there and the space that's already there to go up from there.
Well, there's a different calculation you have to enter into when you're doing it's called the mixed use district that the state allows you to do under 3A, but it's much more strict about the requirements you can place on a multifamily district, and that's one of the reasons we took a step back and didn't include the shopping center. I think at some point it would be beneficial for the city to actually take a look at it and come up with zoning to sort of define what the city wants there. rather than wait for a developer to come in with a 40B project and do what they want to do on
Yeah.
their own. But doing that under 3A wasn't the appropriate time to do that because, for one, under the state's guidelines, we couldn't require parking for the commercial portion of the development, right? Which would be crazy that you couldn't require off-street parking for a grocery store. Now,
A grocery store?
the reality is
That's what?
yeah, the reality of the situation is that when I talked to the state about this and was trying to figure out if it was doable for us to consider this, I was told that essentially no one could get financing for a mixed-use commercial project that didn't have enough parking for the commercial enterprise. But having said that, we couldn't put that in our zoning, so we felt it best to leave that for its own consideration at a later date.
I understand.
And again, the sprawl, to address your sprawl question, that again was part of the reason why we didn't look further afield during the first public function we had for 3A, where people came and looked at the big maps and marked out where they'd like to see some additional housing. There were a number of folks who chose big sections of undeveloped property in West Boston.
Isn't that what they did in Manchester?
I'm not sure. I think they put it over existing commercial property and things like that.
And again, the problem with doing that are multiple. That number one, that area didn't have the public services, water and sewer weren't there yet. So you'd be talking about bringing in that infrastructure. But the other issue is that area was zoned R10 and R20. So that if you start, again, if you're sticking with 3-family development and you put a 3-family unit on an R20 lot, that drives your overall density way down. So that means you have to have even more in the denser area of the city to make up for that. So
And you have to add more physical area back into that circle that you got. So everything that you added on the outside, you had to add on the inside. So the intention, I think, and there are those of us who are really concerned about housing affordability and creating more housing, but even we had to acknowledge that if you start adding a bunch of stuff in the outlying areas, the other wards, which was a possibility, you increase the impact on the TOD zone. So,
Could you explain TOD?
transit-oriented district,
Okay.
or transportation-oriented, and there's all sorts of T's. But basically, if we had these pockets that sort of ring around the half-mile circle with largely the center and certainly the waterfront area untouched. But if we had added a bunch of acres out here in Ward 1 and Ward 3, or Ward 4 and Ward 5, you would have had to encroach even more on downtown to compensate for the additional space and lack of density.
What can you, the short-term rental, was something just passed recently on short-term rentals that
It
were
was.
more restrictive?
It is.
Okay, so can you explain that? And was that indirect?
No.
Like before this comes,
Nothing-
we want to
nothing-
make sure
nothing- nothing
we
to
want
do
to
with
make
3A.
sure no one can have an
Nothing-
Airbnb,
right.
do this so that they can Airbnb it.
The basic gist of what the short-term rental does is we're trying to stem the encroachment of our Airbnbs into neighborhoods and taking away potential housing. So we've created, the nut of it is that if you live in your house and you want to Airbnb a room in your house and you always live there, you can do that. That's if it's bringing in money to the house, whatever, you can do that. If you live in a house for 6 months a year, right, and you rent it out 6 months a year, you can do that. So if if you want to live here 6 months a year and rent it out short-term rental over the course of the rest of the 6 months a year, you can do that as well. If you don't live in that house, if you buy a house and say, I'm just going to Airbnb this 365 days a year, you're not going to be able to do that. You're going to get 120 days a year. And then the rest of the remaining 8 months, you can hopefully short lease it, in the sense of, or you can lease it for 30 days or 31 days or more. But the idea is to disincentivize purchasing properties, and specifically for the purpose of taking them off of the rental market and using them as Airbnb and short-term rentals. We've also made it so that corporations can't own short-term rental buildings. So if you have BlackRock comes down and wants to buy you know, all of the Stacy Avenue and say we're going to do nothing but Airbnbs here. They can't do that.
So there's no, so if you own your own property, and say you're downtown,
Yeah.
and you want an Airbnb, there's no, so here's something that I might have been misinformed on, that there was, after, there was a cap on the number of Airbnbs that could be here. So if you own it, doesn't matter, you're not subject to a number that you can't?
No, that's not quite true. Okay, one of the
Because you didn't mention that.
one of the caveats is that it's the unit that's important. Do you live in the unit? So if I buy a 2-family house, right? I live downstairs and I want to rent upstairs, or vice versa. Because I'm not living in that house for 6 months or more a year, it's subject to the 120-day rule. So you can rent it out for 120 days as a short-term rental. But once you hit that 120-day mark, you have to go to over 30 days at a time. So that again is designed to disincentivize short-term rentals. I mean, certainly somebody could make the argument that they make enough money in 120 days and then they don't have to have anybody in there. That's possible. But we don't think, or we hope that that's not the way that the law is going to be done. Now, the maximum number of short-term rentals cap was, I think, too high. We set it too high. We set it at 500 for non-residentially occupied units, meaning any unit that doesn't have someone living in it for 6 months or more.
Does that include hotels?
No, hotels and
Yeah.
inns and
They're not-
motels
they're
are
not
all under.
This is good
separate
information,
things.
because there's a lot of people that don't know this.
But if you own, say you buy a 2-unit, building and you don't live in it, you can rent one of those out. That's the other thing, is that you as an individual, you can rent one short-term rental. And you cannot have then a fee interest in another unit that's being rented out. So basically, you can't have a situation where you can own parts of 10 different places. You have to designate who's going to be the owner of that building, and it has to be there. So again, it's really designed to it's not going to eliminate it. We have to recognize that there's lots of people who come to Gloucester on a short-term rental basis, and it's good for the economy to a point. But there is also a point at which it becomes detrimental to the housing situation, and people can't afford to live here.
So you mentioned, so there is a cap.
There is
a 500 unit cap
for non-residential, but
for
to be honest with you,
non-residential. But if you own a 3-family,
right,
you can, and you live in one of the units.
You've got 3 years to sort out what you want to do with that. There's a 3-year sunset clause, at which point you'll be subject to all the regulations. As long, well, let me. It's more complicated than that. If you are a registered legal short-term rental by the end of the year, 12/31/2024, you have 3 years from that date to decide how you want to handle your particular Airbnb, right? If you come in on January 1st and want to rent your building, you're subject to the law as it's written. So the idea there.
So I'm not talking about the sunset. I'm talking after the dust clears.
After the dust clears,
what's going to happen?
If you as a property owner can rent out one unit, and if you don't live there, you can rent it out for 120 days. If you live there for 6 months at least, you can rent it out for the remaining 6 months as short-term rental. And if you live there permanently, you can rent out rooms as
rooms, but not units.
Not units. So if you have a 2-family, you can rent that 2-family, that unit you're not living in, for 120 days. Now the cap, I think the cap, we put the cap on there. I think we're going to reconsider the cap when we get a count and a clearer picture of how many non-residential short-term rentals there are out there, because we don't have a good number. We know there's 467 registered with the state, but we've also been hearing from people, we have lots of people who don't have registered short-term rentals. So when we get a sense of that, I think we're going to bring that number down. I would like to see it brought down. I made a point that Napa, California, the big wine country area, they have a limit on their short-term rentals for non-resident owner, 41 in the entire city of Napa. Okay.
Well, Napa is the property values are so high and
Right.
everything like that they get money.
But people come up for the wine tours and all that stuff like that. But they have 41 non-residential permits allowed per year, and we are looking at not 41.
But all the details that Jason's been going over is the principal reason why that it's a separate ordinance as opposed to trying to put it in this particular overlay, right? Because this overlay touches on a very small part of the city.
It seems like
you
it
want
was-
it to be broad-based.
Yeah. Well, it seems like it was put in before the 3A to make sure that these places that by right we're going to have 2 and 3 families
Yeah, no.
don't automatically make them.
No, they were-
because that investment is automatically financially, it makes it worth money to invest in.
Right.
Right. I mean.
Right, but they may have been on similar highways, but they weren't on the same road.
That's right.
In fact, Tony Gross, who initiated the short-term rental, actually did it last year and pulled it back because we hadn't really it wasn't completely baked.
Yeah.
This is something that somebody pointed out online. It's sort of about grant funding, and they were questioning the ARPA funding that we got and saying, why don't you put the $1.5 million that you're putting towards affordable housing towards the sewer project? When you look at the $23 million the city received, Greg Berga took $10 million right off the top and put it towards the sewer treatment plant project, right? And the other $13 million was divided amongst other needs and worthy issues that need to be done. We don't deal with one problem at a time. We don't go, oh, here's a problem, let's take our focus off everything else, solve this problem, and then move on to the next one. Because while you're doing that, all these other problems are getting worse, and they're not being attended to. So, we have to balance and weigh each action as to what we can accomplish at any given time.
Let me give you both an opportunity to dispel any rumors that
Yeah.
I have not brought up that are clearly misinformation. That
I got a
would-
whole list
that-
of them.
Well, start with
Let's
the
start with the
big ones that
Let's start with the
that you
top.
can unequivocally say
Okay.
this is being said and this is absolutely not true and this is what the actual law says.
So the first thing it is that the capacity issue of 2,270 units was brought up immediately. People assumed that the city was requiring the building of 2,270 units.
New units.
New units, right? Not so. It's basically capacity says if you have a house here on this lot and you could build, if it conforms to everything, you could build a 3-family unit on here. That's a capacity of 3. Doesn't matter what's there now, it's counted as a capacity of 3. Now, if there happens to be 2 units on there right now, right, it has a capacity of 3.
Right.
But you can only put one additional unit on it.
Yeah.
Right.
So that has been one of the driving forces. People keep saying, how are we going to fit 2,270 people? And then that translates into 2 things that are really just mathematically not possible. The 2270 is going to make sure that we have 11,000 new residents in Gloucester. Okay? So first off, we're not having 2,270 units. So we can't have 11,000 new residents. And of that, 2,270 of them were supposed to be brand new students in our schools at a cost of $22,000 a piece,
Right.
or $45 million more for our budget. Not happening.
Not happening, right. So that was a question that I had, like if you put 200 units,
Yep.
so here it is.
Okay.
Here was my
Let's do
concern.
your math.
Because I'm actually generally, I'm very much a pro-development guy.
Yeah.
I'm very much a pro-development guy. One thing that made me nervous was a monstrous project at Shaw's.
Okay.
I just thought that, like, if you put all of them right there, I just felt like you're gonna get 200 students, or you're gonna get 100 students, and
How many students do we get out of Halyard?
I don't know.
I don't know.
That'd be a good question.
I don't know.
That would be a good question.
But if you look at our population in the schools since Halyard was built,
Has it gone up?
it hasn't gone up and basically hasn't. It's basically hasn't
Flatlined.
really changed. I
Yeah.
mean, every populations of the schools go up and down every year,
Yeah.
right? And you have no control over
Yeah.
that, right? I mean, we could have a baby boom in town with existing people, and suddenly there'd be more kids for a kindergarten, and that cohort gets there. But the important thing to look at on that
That's
is
a good point, though. Just to
Yeah.
stop to
No.
because that is a good point. Halyard came. How many units?
200.
200 units. So here's a perfect example.
Yeah.
And before Halyard and after Halyard, the schools didn't get decimated.
no.
No.
And one of the things that Halyard did whether you like Halyard or not, right?
Talk about it.
Doesn't bother me. I don't. It's not. That's irrelevant.
Yeah.
But I know personally at least three people or couples or whatever who were able to sell their house as seniors
Yes.
and move into Halyard,
Right.
opening up 3 units in the public sphere for someone else to move in.
Here's a perfect example. You have your parent, one of your parents passes.
Yep.
They're getting a little bit older. They have a big yard, a big house.
Yep.
A house is worth $1 million.
Yep. Don't need it.
But they're cash poor.
Right?
Yeah.
They sell their house.
Yeah.
They got $1 million.
Yeah.
They're over the,
Yep.
they don't have to pay the taxes on it because they're old, right?
Right.
And then they go Halyard, a couple $1,000s a month. They can live into perpetuity
Yeah.
without having to touch the principal.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, and not have to worry about it. Like I don't like being I love my house. I love my family. I would prefer to be in a condo.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not have to deal with
Especially at your age.
all this
They
stuff.
want to do less and less.
I want to do less. I want to do less. Yeah.
But getting back to the schools thing,
Yeah.
and also this idea that every child comes with a bill of $22,000. What that number is that's the whole number for everything that we spend on education, including kids that we outplace to special needs schools outside that can cost anywhere from $250,000 to $350,000 a year. All gets lumped into a thing and divided by the number of students. That's your per pupil
But you have
spending.
fixed costs. So
You
I
have
think
fixed costs.
So if your building cost for Gloucester High School is not going to go up or down,
Right.
you still have to heat it.
Right.
Yeah.
If you have
One student or
Right.
1,000 students.
Right.
And the other thing to remember
unless
is
you
that
have to increase
if you
because
get
have
to the
hire
point
more
where you
teachers.
get enough in one cohort that you have to hire teachers, then you have an expansion cost. But if you add, let's say every classroom has 25 kids, right? And I forget how many fifth graders we have. We have 3 elementary schools now. We maybe have 3, 4, 8, 9, 10 classes of fifth graders. If you added 20 fifth graders to the mix, right? That's 2 in each class. You're not changing the dynamic of the school costs.
with a fixed cost.
Right.
Yeah.
Now,
And just to get back to the potential numbers that you were asking about, because again, to Jason's point, people keep raising the 2,200 to 70 units as if they're going to be new and somehow crammed in. That's physically impossible. We know that because this is an overlay that sits on top of already existing buildings for the most part, and it was designed that way because this is where our density is, and if you're going to see, and it has that type of density already, right? There are plenty of 3 families. But to Jason's point, if there's 2 units there already, it still counts as 3 in terms of zoning. If there's 1, it still counts as 3, but there's only potential to add 1 or 2 units to those buildings. And the complicated situation with the R5 neighborhood, as we said before, is that a lot of those lots aren't compliant, or the buildings themselves aren't compliant. And so those aren't going to be by right uses. They're going to have to, they can still go through the ZBA process, but they're not as
It's
of
not
right.
automatic.
Right. And so the best sort of guesstimate we came up with of if everyone in all of these districts decided to build to whatever capacity
Without
they
a,
could,
without a variance.
Who
yeah,
could?
without a variance, then including the 60, 65 units up by the Halyard, including the
Behind
Gloucester
McDonald's.
Housing Authority.
well, the McDonald's property is not in the
McDonald's, yeah.
ZBA,
But,
not in the 3A.
The Gloucester Housing property on Railroad Avenue, the mill building on Railroad Avenue. The Gloucester Housing Authority can come up with a little slight increase in density, not a whole much, not something that's going to make a dramatic increase. But if everyone in the district chose to build, the estimate is that maybe somewhere between 400 and 500 units by right could happen if they choose to. And we know 400, 500 units won't happen because right now everyone throughout the city except for Eastern Point and Shore Road can do 2-family by right. And yet I think it's somewhere like 45% of the units within R5, the existing overall R5 district, are still single-family homes. They've not exercised their right
Even though they could.
to convert to 2. And so it's very unlikely that the 400 to 500 units, those property owners are going to elect to do that too, based on sort of historic data, looking back at how development proceeds year in, year out, typically. My guess is someone who sat on the planning board for
14 years.
2007, 2006, 2007, is that if somebody develops opposite of Halyard, those 60, 65 units, and if we see sort of average annual growth of your property owner that suddenly finds you can convert to 3, you want to do that, that's, again, for your family or extra income, that probably year over year, 10 years out, we might have 100 new units that are in the district. Again,
Units, not in 100 new 3 families. Units.
No,
Units.
total
Right.
units.
Right.
total
That's
units.
the
Yeah.
point.
Because again, some of those that add are already going to be 2 units. Some of those people in the area, they might consider going to 3, but decide not to go 3, but use this as an impetus to go ahead and convert to a duplex, add another unit. But again, there's absolutely zero possibility that all those property owners that have those 400 to 500 units
Are gonna
are going to do
And
it.
keep in mind that, one, we're also, I mean, this may change, but likely not. We live in a time where it's exceptionally expensive to build, right? And so you're not going to see developers coming into town, buying properties, tearing them down to build new 3plexes. Now, they could do that. It's a possibility. It's a very remote possibility, but it's not financially feasible. Ask developers who do small projects like that, and they're going to tell you that, you know, to buy something at market value and tear it down.
I'm for anything that takes away red tape
Yeah.
when it comes to
Now,
And
what's some of the other things?
One of the other
Yeah.
fallacies, I think, is the number of bedrooms and
Yes.
occupancy rates.
Unlimited bedrooms and unlimited occupancy.
Right. People keep pointing to this because the guidelines for 3A told cities and towns that we couldn't zone to restrict that. We couldn't say, all right, here's our district, but it can only have single studio apartments in it,
Right.
to preclude families coming in. Right?
Oh, I see.
It has to be family friendly, so you have to allow
Or
the
seniors.
allowance. Or,
We can't
yeah, we can't just say
designate that it
seniors,
has to be.
even though somebody can come in and build senior housing. Our zoning just can't restrict it to that, right? And so, in
So
terms,
okay, let's make that differentiate. So someone can build senior housing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
yeah,
It's not excluded from it.
no,
No.
The zoning, it just doesn't say.
We can't articulate that you can't do certain things via the zoning.
Okay.
We can't say you can only build studio apartments, because
Right.
the idea being that if you make the 3A zoning so restrictive that it can't do anything, that defeats the whole purpose of it. So they're saying you can't say it has to be family. You have to be able to build a family unit if you want to. It says you can't restrict it to seniors only, right? So the opposition is run with it, saying you can't build senior housing. That is not true. If you want to come in and build senior housing and you want to do that, knock your socks off, right? Go for it, because that is allowed usage. We just can't tell you that you have to do it.
right. Yeah, and point of fact, that the parcel we talked about opposite Halyard on Schoolhouse Road, if the developer wanted to come in, again, there's been no interest from someone that
Assisted
wanted to do
living.
assisted living, but if somebody came in and wanted to build senior housing, they're completely within their rights to build it.
If they wanted
as
to do a
single.
55 and over apartment complex or condo complex, that would be allowed.
It's
How
just
has
that our
that not
zoning.
happened?
I don't know.
You would think that is like an absolute
With the number of people
no-brainer.
we know who've moved down to other places and other communities, you would think it would happen, but you know.
One of the difficulties that I've been told is that our zoning for assisted living has an affordability mandate, right? And that folks have pointed out that there's no clarity as to what aspect of the living has to be affordable, right? Is it the monthly rent you pay just for your residential
buy
use,
in.
or is it your entire care, the entire care package,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Right.
And so, what I think when the mayor Spathia several years ago created a committee to look into this, and what came out of the committee was that rather than necessarily assisted living, what we need is a place where seniors can live and have some assistance with services, getting the services. And so that's going to be the real focus of the YMCA project up on Middle Street, that there is office space in there for those senior services to come in and interact with the seniors who live there, but they're not in an assisted living situation, but the services have space where they can come in and provide services to those seniors who are living there. And again, that's not officially assisted living, but it's a good way of providing housing, much needed housing for the seniors, and providing them some assistance on site in the process. But again, just to go back to the whole occupancy thing, occupancy is not defined within zoning ordinance. It's defined by state health code. Right? And I posted and replied to several posts online citing this, no restrictions on bedrooms, occupancy, etc. That the state health code, which does very specifically say this is how big a bedroom can be, and if the bedroom is this size, one person can fit in it. If the bedroom is this size, two people can fit in it. And it goes beyond the bedrooms to the size of the unit itself. And if you have, I think it's anything less than 550 square feet, you could have 2 bedrooms in that, but it's a maximum of 4 people can be there. Yeah. And again, all that is defined in state health code, not in anyone's zoning, because that's a statewide regulation. It's not subject to what Gloucester says or what Ipswich says or what Boston says. It's defined by the state within the health code.
So a couple other things I think are really important. I've heard that people are continuing with the notion that we're going to see Van Pool Street along Railroad Avenue, Maplewood, and the whole bit downtown. Again, 89%, no, 90, more than that I think, actually, including West Gloucester, of our zoning in 3A is 3 family, right?
At 35 foot max. At
35 foot max. So you can't build a 5-story multi-unit building that's over 3 anywhere without a permit right now, okay? Except the
on
house,
Schoolhouse Road.
On the Schoolhouse
and basically
Road.
the zoning
one
designed
spot.
for Schoolhouse Road basically mirrors the density and dimensional requirements of Highway.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be out of
Any
place.
different.
there.
And the other thing is
And you have the highway access on and off.
Right.
It's not like you're
Yeah.
jamming up downtown.
and all their utilities have been freshly done and the whole thing. Van Pool Street was done well before 3A was even in the works because it was part of Beverly's own expansion plan. So
And Beverly specifically zoned to create Van Pool Street. They
Yeah.
bumped their height up to 70 feet by right along that corridor, specifically so they could get the high rises that they wanted to see there.
Right.
But it has nothing to do with 3A, and our zoning has nothing to do with building massive
Very,
complexes
very
like that.
different.
Totally
Yeah.
different.
Very
And
different.
that's the other
Three
thing.
family. This really seems to be more about families and
That's the
three
intention.
families that in existing structures.
And the thing
Right.
is, the thing that's been other frustrating things that we've had to deal with is people say it's one size fits all zoning. Well, it's not. Every community has its own power to devise what zoning works for them in the context of the regulations, and that's why the regulations and the guidelines, they are a little on the vague side, because what they're saying is that you as a community need to do, this is the base level of what you have to do. How you do it, as long as you accomplish that, is up to you. So that's again why we stuck with 3 family zone, 3 family multifamilies, because that more closely recognizes what we have in
Right, and
existence now.
that's why I've also been pointing people, rather than argue what the guidelines say, pointing them directly to the city website where they can find the actual ordinance that the city council voted on. Essentially, when you read through the requirements for the downtown and West Gloucester station areas, that language pretty much mirrors what we have already in R5. Again, we've shifted some of the
4,000 to 5,000.
Yeah, 4,000 to 5,000, and again, the setbacks in West Gloucester are a little different because those are 6,000 square foot lots, etc. But basically, we modeled those 3 family districts on what already exists in R5, and the modeling for those other 2 districts, the one that incorporates the mill and the Gloucester Housing Authority property, and then the other parcel up in Plaza, we modeled those on the existing zoning that was, or what exists there already,
Yep.
right? So it's not, the state had no hand in coming in telling us to change our zoning dramatically from what it was. Basically, all it took were small shifts in our existing zoning to get compliance.
This is a land grab. This is one I love. The people saying this is a land grab by the state. Okay, show me anywhere that says you're going to cede your property rights to the state or anyone else. That cannot happen. It's just. I mean, I explain to people what eminent domain is and takings. The government has to actually have a purpose, public purpose, to take your land. You have to pay for fair market value. They've got to, all of that, not part of this. Okay.
What it does is actually increase the property.
It does.
Like it says, again, if you own a single-family home in this district and you want to convert it to 3, you're able to do that.
That's pretty good.
Another big one, and I think what's at the heart of people signing this petition is that they think that by signing this petition that's going around asking the council to rescind its vote on the thing, is going to nullify our requirement to be in compliance with 3A, and that is false. There's nothing about what this petition is doing that is going to do anything except make us non-compliant by the deadline and potentially start to lose grant funding and the preferred borrowing funding because we're out of compliance. The only thing it would do is it would require the city planning board and the city council to go back and start again. And we'll come up with a plan that will then have to be approved, sent to the state for compliance.
So like what happened a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But the
except
reality
that we have to do it this time.
Right. The reality of revisiting it, though, is that this is pretty much the minimal.
Right.
What we designed, what the council passed, is pretty much adheres to the minimum that we had to do to come into compliance. So the only thing we could really do, again, if somebody wants to say, create a district over in East Gloucester, we can do that. But you're going to add those potential units to your overall number, to 12,270, which means you have to then come back to the
Put more.
downtown
land
station
area.
area
Yeah.
and put more,
Density.
expand that area, right? So if people don't want to see much change, this was really the best process, or the best
If you don't
option.
want to see much change in the suburbs, then this is your route.
Right, and it doesn't mean that we can't, in the future, look at our zoning in East Gloucester or out of Magnolia or parts of West Gloucester. I think a strong argument can be made that these other areas can stand some multifamily homes, right? I mean, Magnolia itself, you've got apartment buildings out there already.
Yep.
There's no reason why we couldn't zone for more of those. There's concern about looking at Magnolia because, again, I said we should look at Magnolia, but the reason that was taken off the table was, again, this issue of the more you put out there, the more you have to put downtown, but also, that's not served by city sewer. It's on septic.
Oh yeah.
And so you have that issue. And again, you can say, well, if you can perk enough for a Dunkin' Donuts, maybe you can perk for a 5 or 6 unit. But rather than make that guess and have nothing happen out there because the people can't perk for enough of an investment and have to add more density downtown at the same time, it's like a loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Losing over
It's a
there
good point
by
to
doing
bring
it.
up too. Is that all of the existing regulations, state law, that deal with septic systems, environmental controls, conservation zones, all of that remains in place, not taken off the table. So again, you're starting to narrow that focus of who can actually develop under the law. And people say, well, if that's the case, then why do it? Well, because we have, as we started at the very beginning, we have a housing affordability crisis. 3A is one piece of this giant puzzle. And so we take 3A, we put that into place, and we say, okay, maybe we build 100 units over 10 years, right? But then we look at other places like Railroad Avenue. There's a Reimagining Railroad Avenue study that was done 10 years ago, not 2014.
Yeah.
That was just put on the shelf. It had some great ideas about how to revitalize some of the areas downtown. all of this is put together into these pieces. We don't look at things with in isolation. You have to look at them in terms of how are we going to fix this overall.
So if I have a one family downtown in this zone,
Yep.
all of a sudden my place is worth a lot more money.
Well, people have said that this is going to affect the property rights.
That's, I mean, really,
I'm like, well,
because
are
all
there
of a sudden
property
now
rights?
I can go up.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be reassessed by the city until you actually.
Until
No,
you
no,
actually do
I
it.
get.
Yeah.
Right.
Listen, I say that as it's a good thing.
That's
I
right.
understand there's
There's
a
a
lot of
potential.
people that look at property values are going to go up as a bad thing. I look at it as a good thing. So
Well, I had a conversation with a guy from Rockport in front of a Stop and Shop. He was talking to the folks getting the petitions, and he said, "Oh yeah, they rezoned my property in Rockport." I said, "Oh," I said, "Did anyone tell you you had to build anything?" He goes, "No." Right, exactly. "Are you planning on building anything?" He goes, "No." I said, "Right, exactly. Literally nothing's changed for you." He goes, "Well, it's gonna drive my property values down." And I said, "I think you'll find it maybe the other way."
it's going to go up.
Yep.
Yeah, no.
And he's like, "Well, I have people that have told me different, and that's what he." That's
Well,
what he believes."
listen, I'll tell you this: if what I thought, which I was obviously wrong, if you were going to put 200 units at Shaw's, I would have thought property values all around there were going to get decimated, and I thought it would be a real problem, and I thought you were going to see, the ambulances there, and you're going to see the fire, the police there all the time. If that is not the case, and the case is you're helping families stay together, and people being able to live in their house because they have another unit that they might be able to rent out so that they can afford to live there, or their kids can live there. Grandparents take care of the kids. The young family goes out to work and has someone there to help them out. It's the complete opposite of what. It's a complete opposite of what I envisioned.
Right.
Right,
It's
right.
literally the way Gloucester has been for how long?
Yeah, well, yeah.
You know, I mean,
any place where
Yeah.
from Ellis Island came, and
Yeah.
any of these cities, Lawrence Lowell,
And
you
you brought up the
Salem.
short-term rental thing. One of the things about the short-term rental, even though it wasn't done in concert with 3A, it does have the impact of saying, be careful about speculative buying, right? If you're gonna try to speculate and work off the short-term rental angle, that may not be in your financial best interest. It'd probably be in your best interest not to do that, because you're going to be very limited in how you can exercise that financial choice. And so we're hopeful that
So if
keeps,
they're registered already, though, that you're gonna take that away from them.
in 3 years, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. The 3 years was designed to say, look, this is what's coming down the road. You got 3 years to figure it out. If you want to keep it and rent it out, great. But at the end of the day, if you don't live in that unit, you're going to have 120 days, and that's it.
That's tough.
And people are going to be mad about that. But
That's
you know,
tough.
it is. But it's unfortunately, here's the thing: if we don't take actions that deal with this, with looking 10, 20 years down the road, we're not doing our job. We don't, again, I keep telling people, we don't look at things in isolation as right now. I mean, certainly we obviously deal with problems as they are right now, but with an eye towards how do we fix this long term. So,
All right. Any other business
But
questions?
just to touch on that about looking forward, I think if we go back 2 or 3 years when we designed those amendments, that again were based on, they came out of Plan 2001, they came out of the Housing Production Plan, it was mentioned in several other plans along the way, that if we had passed those 2 or 3 years ago, the only thing we would have had done to come into compliance with 3A principally is draw
Draw a line.
what the new district looks like, because our zoning would have already applied to it. We would just have to show the district to show the numbers, right? So
That's it.
if we had been forward-looking back then, as we should have been, and again, those amendments were developed exactly along the lines we're talking about, that it's going to make it easier for existing homeowner, existing families to take care of their kids, their adult kids, to take care of their aging
Seniors,
parents, siblings to live together in the same house, as people down in Gloucester for centuries, right? So I think we do need to, as Jason said, continue looking forward. I think that's why you'll probably see the planning board in the coming year, start to take a look at bring that reimagining Road Avenue plan back up to the fore for discussion, so that we don't find ourselves confronting your fear of 200 units at the Shaws, because we've already taken a look at it, we've gotten feedback from the public, and we designed zoning that if somebody is going to come in and create a mixed-use residential development there, keep the supermarket down below and add a couple of stories. If that does happen, then we've consulted with the public and sort of built the zoning to contain the density that the community wants, right? So it's not 200 units.
Not 6 stories high.
Right. It's not 200 units. It might be 60 units or whatever.
Right.
Again.
Yeah.
So.
And if that protects Shaws from going away,
Yep.
because the last thing we want down there is a food desert. A lot of people rely on Shaws down there.
Yeah.
And if we lose Shaws because of 40B action, there's nothing to prevent the guy who owns that property from walking in and filing a 40B application and demolishing it tomorrow.
And that would have nothing to do with
It
that.
has nothing to do with anything that we're talking about.
Right. So
That's
all
a
the
potential
fears,
now.
all the fears of 3A have nothing to do with
Right.
what that guy could do,
Right.
if he wanted to do.
But unfortunately, the fears of 3A have outpaced the reality of 3A and the facts of 3A. And I would say, wrapping this up, if you sign this petition based on information that's false, my understanding is you can apply to the clerk's office to have your signature removed from the petition, but understand that that petition is going to do, the process is this. The petition, if it's verified with enough signatures, will suspend the action by the council moving forward. We can't implement the zoning until it's put to an election. The election has to be called as a special election, will cost between $20,000 to $25,000 to hold. And if the petition signers are successful and they get the public to vote down the council's decision, all that does is start us back at square one to become compliant with 3A. It does not nullify our requirement to be in compliance with 3A. That is a state law. The only way that's changing is if the legislature rescinds it or modifies it, or the SJC, the Supreme Judicial Court, rules it unconstitutional. And neither one of those are particularly likely. Zoning has always been from the state down. The way we craft it is up to us, but this petition is going to cost the city of Gloucester a lot of money. And that is money that we can ill afford. We have major projects coming down the road, and those projects are going to be done. The payment of that project depends on how we get that money, whether it's grant money, good financing, forgiveness because we're a housing choice community, whatever. But if we don't have that designation, if we aren't in compliance, that project will be done entirely on the backs of Gloucester taxpayers and ratepayers. And that is the nut of that petition. I can't make it any more clear.
I would say if you have concerns about what the city how we actually respond to 3A, rather than listen to the petition signature gathering or reading what's posted on Facebook, go to the city website, download the document. It's about 3-4 pages long, and read it. And if you don't understand it, go to the planning department and say, how is this different? How does this affect me? And again, the reality is that it has very minimal effect, and we won't see a real bump in the housing we produce year in, year out anyway. So,
Majority of it is going to be on existing structures.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
guys, thank you so much for joining
Thanks
me.
for the opportunity.
God help us if this isn't recording right now. I was not the guy that pressed the button.
We're going to find out that it hasn't, and
Tell me
Joey's
it's
going to have to
ticking
write.
off. Tell me it's ticking. You see the number?
yes.
Oh,
Thank
thank
God.
God.
Press the button and stop it now. Thank God.
Thank you, folks. And listen, you can also reach out to your city councilors and planning board members. We all understand this.
Go ahead, hand it to me.
Yep. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You ready?
Thanks.